Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
And these deaths are preventable.
7,000 deaths in 5 years from toxic drugs. Why BC's other health crisis is only getting worse. Also,
brutally, honestly, I think that we're going to need more time than this to come back and play hockey.
Not ready. Why a Vancouver Canucks says Friday's return to action after a COVID outbreak may be too soon. And
la 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 la.
A Surrey singer-songwriter hits a new low.
La la.
And makes her way into the Guinness Book of World Records.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with breaking news tonight. All teachers in one particular health region in BC will be getting the COVID-19 vaccine starting as early as this week.
Our Tanya Fletcher is with us live again tonight. Tanya, the teachers union has been pushing hard for this, so where are these mass vaccinations happening?
It looks like staff in all school districts within the Vancouver Coastal Health region will be able to get vaccinated starting this Friday. I think we have a photo of this letter here. It comes from a letter that was posted to Twitter by former Vancouver School Board Chair Patty Backus. And in it, you'll see Superintendent of the Vancouver School Board, Suzanne Hoffman, says Vancouver Coastal Health has secured a supply of COVID-19 vaccines and all staff, regardless of their role, will be eligible. Now, it goes on to say the health authority will be reaching out to staff at school and district sites to let them know how and exactly when they can begin booking appointments. Clinic hours will be held outside of school time, so evenings and weekends. The vaccines being used weren't identified in the letter, although the province has said in the past that some Pfizer and Moderna doses from the age-based rollout have been set aside for what they're calling hotspot vaccinations to target doses where they're needed most. The rollout may take several weeks, and so far Surrey is the only district that's seen most of teachers there get vaccinated to this point.
And Tanya, in other COVID-19 news tonight, the Vancouver Canucks' JT Miller is making waves in the hockey world this evening. What's he saying?
Well, he says he's worried for his teammates and for himself as they stare down an end-of-season schedule that's heavily condensed because of a COVID-19 outbreak with the team. He says he never thought he'd be in this scenario in his entire career. COVID-19 has ravaged the Canucks roster and kept players off the ice, many of them symptomatic. Miller himself hasn't contracted COVID, but he says he's spoken with several of his teammates who have. And to complete its 56-game schedule, Vancouver must play its remaining 19 games in just 31 days. And Miller thinks his team is being rushed onto the ice after the outbreak, saying it's dangerous to a lot of players.
We have to be prepared to play, but at the same time, I mean, I think that whoever, the schedule was made, I understand the guys coming off of 3 weeks of rest, 2 weeks of having COVID at one practice isn't even close to near enough time to come back and perform at a high level. So, and on that, it's not even about being able to perform. It's nothing to do with hockey at this point. Brutally, honestly, I think that, we're going to need more time than this to come back and play hockey.
And he says this is about the health and safety of the players and their families, and it's not about making the playoffs at this point.
Forcing us to play 19 and 30 or 31 days and think about the playoffs when guys are still recovering from this and are expected to be ready to play. It's frustrating, and I just want to make sure everybody's priorities are in the right place.
Now, keep in mind, the Canucks haven't played since March 24th, but the team is supposed to be back on the ice this week. Vancouver scheduled for a game against the Oilers coming up this Friday. Anita, Mike.
All right, the very candid comments of JT Miller tonight. Tanya Fletcher with us live. Thanks very much. And there are now more patients tonight in hospital with COVID-19 in our province than at any other point in this pandemic. It comes as the province records nearly 1,200 new cases of the virus today. The number of people in hospital has jumped up to 397. 120 people are in intensive care. There have also been 6 new COVID-19 related deaths. But on a positive note, more than 41,000 people received a vaccine yesterday, the highest number so far. Nearly 2 million doses have been given out.
And nearly $17,000 in fines were handed out last week in Surrey to people not following COVID-19 health orders.
Just over the weekend, we had a restaurant in Whalley that remained open with people dining inside, which we know is against public health orders. And then our officers went on Sunday to a wedding that was being held at a residence where they had 22 people attending that. So in both of those cases, $2,300 fines were handed out.
The COVID compliance and enforcement team issued 18 tickets in total. Mounties say the warming temperatures and COVID fatigue, there is a desire to gather, and that means teams will be out this weekend in parks and along beaches to ensure rules are being followed.
And people who test positive for COVID-19 in BC are having trouble finding out if they've contracted any of the variant strains.
What's frustrating is that COVID-wise, I don't know what strain I have, and they're not disclosing that. I don't think I know of anyone that is able to definitively determine from public health whether or not they had a variant.
Vancouver Coastal Health doesn't tell patients who are tested if they have variants or whether their sample was even screened for one.
Well, will the current COVID-19 restrictions be extended? The province says a final decision hasn't been made yet. BC's health minister says the 3-week circuit breaker is having some effect, but the situation remains serious.
Yesterday, Dr. Henry and her team, Dr. Emerson, met with representatives of the restaurant industry and talked very frankly with them about where we were right now, that case counts were still too high, that hospitalization was growing, and that in her view, that steps would continue to be required. A decision.
The circuit breaker started March 30th. Now, 2 weeks and 1 incubation period in, case numbers remain high. The BC Food and Restaurant Association says it has been told to brace for a continuation of the order banning indoor dining into May.
And the restrictions and high case numbers confirm a third wave of COVID-19 is raging in parts of the country.
This week, another terrible statistic as Canada's per capita caseload moved ahead of our southern neighbors. Susanna De Silva shows us what that looks like from province to province.
Patio weather is finally here, and BC restaurants say they have been told patios will be the only place they can serve customers until sometime in May.
It's going to hurt our team, and it's going to hurt our ability to rebound past this as well.
The province saw another jump in cases today, more than 2 weeks after circuit breaker measures were put into place, already prompting cancellation of some surgeries. The latest figures put variants of concern at 15% of new cases, including hundreds of cases of the variant first seen in Brazil. In Alberta, more than half of cases are variants, and after a surge in cases in Calgary classrooms, grades 7 to 12 are moving online.
Looking at levels of transmission in our communities right now is like watching a flood rise higher and higher.
Today, Saskatchewan told people not to travel within the province, and in Manitoba, officials are mulling a requirement for masks outdoors in a province where the variant first seen in the UK has killed 2 people. This 22-year-old spent 9 days in hospital.
First 5 to 6 days were pretty horrible. Like, I was very bedbound, not a lot of movement, like it was very exhausting.
Ontario set another record today with 635 COVID patients in intensive care. The province has promised new beds by the end of the week, but beds alone won't do it.
It's not like there's this abundance of clinicians who are available to service the existing beds we have.
Next door, the message from Montreal hospitals, the ER is only for absolute emergencies.
Every single center has wings that are closed, beds that are closed because of missing nurses.
Today, one of Canada's smallest provinces, Newfoundland and Labrador, offered to do what it can to help the very biggest. That tells you how the battle is going. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
To BC's other health crisis now, and today marks a somber anniversary.
5 years, 7,000 deaths. It has been 5 years since BC declared a public health emergency because of a spike in overdoses. So far this year, toxic drugs are killing an average of 5 people every day.
Isabel Regam spoke with the family members of some people who have lost their lives.
It's not a drug overdose, it's induced homicide. My son was poisoned. Shireen Chester has lived a parent's worst nightmare, burying her child.
It's really difficult. People go, oh, you're so strong, you're amazing. I don't have a choice.
Her son Jordan is one of more than 7,000 British Columbians to die of illicit drugs since 2016. 2 years ago, her 25-year-old son Jordan had recently come out of rehab as he battled a drug addiction. He was on the road to recovery, but during a moment of relapse, she says he texted a dealer for heroin, but that was not what he received.
Going by Jordan's autopsy, he had smoked pure fentanyl. They said enough was in there to kill an elephant. So we were told he died pretty much instantly.
It's why Shireen Chester is here among a crowd of hundreds in Vancouver demanding safe supply. This on the 5th year anniversary since BC declared an overdose emergency.
This is us taking action as quickly as it needs to be taken, which is getting clean drugs, the drugs that people want, into their hands so they can use them and not overdose.
Organizers say it's why they've set up this pop-up tent to hand out free, tested drugs to users.
Every life lost is a policy failure.
Guy Felicella's mission to get illicit drugs off the streets is personal. He struggled for decades with homelessness and addiction.
My last overdose was February 18th, 2013, and it was about 9 or 10 minutes that I was gone. And I just remember waking up and the nurse was crying, and I started to cry. I didn't want to die. And
now he uses his experiences to help end the stigma and push for health policies as an advisor with the BC Centre on Substance Use.
Safer supply right now is the most urgent, needed response to the illicit drug supply right now.
But the drugs on the street, people don't have a chance.
Shireen Chester says while it's too late for her child, it's not too late for other families. Isabel Regem, CBC News, Vancouver.
So what about that push to decriminalize drug possession in BC?
Dan Burrett has that part of the story now. Dan, provincial leaders and health officials have made this plea before.
Yes, for a long time. BC first proposed this in February, and now the application to make it happen is underway. Decriminalization, according to them, would see the possession of small amounts of drugs for personal use changed from a crime to really an administrative penalty. But manufacturing or trafficking illicit drugs would remain illegal. Dr. Bonnie Henry says she's pleased the province has started working on its application to the feds and hopes Ottawa will respond quickly. She says it's vital they break problematic cycles of people dealing with addiction ending up in the court system.
Recognizing that putting conditions on people who have substance use issues or addiction that require them not to use substances is not helpful and is not working. So those are the off-ramps we need. We need to have those.
Meanwhile, BC's Mental Health and Addictions Minister announced $45 million over 3 years today to expand overdose prevention services like supervised consumption sites and naloxone supply province-wide. They also plan to work with people who have lived with addiction, Indigenous leaders, and law enforcement.
And it will include public information so that people understand this isn't about legalization, like what happened with marijuana. This is about possessing small amounts of personal drugs so that it will no longer be a crime. We know
Okay, Dan, with all that being said, it's of course up to Ottawa to decide whether to grant BC's request. So I guess the question is, will it?
It's still not clear, Mike. Prime Minister Trudeau has said in the past he would not support drug decriminalization, saying, quote, it's not a silver bullet. But speaking on CBC Radio's Daybreak South in Kelowna today, Trudeau says when it comes to safe supply, Ottawa has allowed dozens of safe consumption sites to open.
We have moved forward on ensuring a safe supply by allowing doctors more freedom to prescribe alternatives, better access, better supports. We're treating the epidemic as a health crisis, not as a justice issue.
Again, we don't yet know when BC's application to have that small personal amount of drugs decriminalized will be in or decided on. Anita, Mike?
Dan Burrett live for us tonight. Thank you. And as BC marks 5 years of toxic overdose deaths, a group of bike paramedics on the downtown east side wants to expand.
As Liam Britton reports tonight, they say trading 4 wheels for 2 has made them faster when every second counts.
For paramedics responding to illicit drug poisonings, it's a race against time. For the past 4 years, paramedics with Squad 248 have found that race is easier won on bicycles.
I think being on a bike, we can provide faster service sometimes, especially in the downtown east side. It's sometimes hard to navigate, hard to get in. So with bikes, we can get in and out of the alleys a little bit easier.
Squad 1, we're in service and available.
Since 2017, they've been riding about 6 months out of the year.
Good, yourself?
Each 11-hour shift sees them cover about 40 kilometers, toting a 45-kilogram bag. Over a recent 6-month span, they were called to over 350 overdoses, and now they might expand to a year-round program.
It's just better patient care. It's delivering better medical services. We need to adapt, and I think we need to adapt because the world around us is changing as well.
Good morning. How you doing, boss?
Meta and the other paramedics of 248 Squad ride through the streets, alleys, and parks of Vancouver's downtown east side. They are on the lookout for people in distress, but also get dispatched like a traditional ambulance. Today's first call is a drug toxicity event at Carnegie Community Center at Main and Hastings.
What it was a morphine pill.
A morphine pill, okay. Is it something you've used normally, or no way?
We're doing anywhere between kind of 2 to 6 overdose calls a day. Yeah, it can mean someone walks away and survives the overdose, and we get them to kind of the appropriate care that they need after that. And then there's always the negative outcome, where people just don't survive the outcome.
The patient in this case was saved thanks to bystanders giving him Narcan. 248 Squad checked him out and put him on a traditional ambulance to take him to a clinic.
Best of luck, sir.
Thank you.
Leaving them to patrol the alleys once more.
Clear. Hold up. Hello. Hello, sir. It's the ambulance checking up on you. You good?
We're good, yeah.
Awesome. You have a good day, sir. Oh, no worries to apologize. We just want to make sure you're good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Cool.
The day's second call is not drug-related at all. It's a man having a diabetic incident. It's a person they're familiar with, and being on bikes helps build that familiarity.
Hello!
Being on the bike, it's quite low barrier, so we get to build those relationships with people. We get to see the same people over and over again. They get to know us, and we get to know them, their stories. We're kind of building those relationships over time.
Toxic illicit drugs have killed more than 7,000 British Columbians since the public health emergency was declared 5 years ago. Multiple groups on the downtown east side are working to stem the tide of these deaths, like the Overdose Prevention Society. Executive Director Sarah Blythe said 248 Squad works with her organization and others to share knowledge and best practices. It's welcome help, but more solutions are needed, like drug decriminalization, safe supply, and better housing and recovery options.
It's not really a humane situation that we remain in this crisis with a lot of the solutions that we have. There's a lot of things that we can actually do. It just needs government bravery at all levels to just get on it and do it.
Meta says he and his team are part of the solution, but they aren't the answer.
How much of a difference do you think you make?
I like to think we've made quite a big difference, judging by the daily gratitude we have from the public and people that we have dealt with. I like to think considerable difference.
Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
A video has surfaced showing 2 men destroying a memorial to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Ladysmith. One of the proponents of the memorial calls it all disturbing.
Most people wouldn't go and touch something, and something that is so out there, like a red dress, you'd think the people would want to know why or what does it symbolize, not take it down. I mean, that's a lot of nerve.
As part of the art installation, red dresses are hung to symbolize Canada's missing and murdered Aboriginal women and girls. The practice has spread around Canada over the past decade. Illikus has been hanging them around Vancouver Island. May 5th is Red Dress Day across Canada. She says she'll be hanging more dresses where those were torn down.
A Kelowna RCMP officer has been charged with assault in connection with the arrest of a suspected impaired driver. Video of the incident shows a man repeatedly punched in the head during the arrest in May of last year. In response to a civil suit, RCMP Constable Ziggy Petrzak says his actions were justified as his fellow officers were struggling to arrest the man. The officer has been charged with 1 count of assault. Petrzak is expected to appear in court in Kelowna on May 3rd.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. Joe, an amazing day. I feel like it's just going to get better and better. But I have to say, I finally put away the parka.
You did it. Everyone, that is a big move. Everyone know that Anita putting the parka away.
Yes.
So I hope we don't have to bring it back.
I was just going to say, I was going to say, I stand by that move.
Great.
So, yeah, we do have continued above seasonal weather in the forecast, but I think we're rounding the corner on the cool side of spring anyway, even once we come out of this towards mid next week. We are breaking a few records before I get to our temperatures. I was just looking at some of the numbers. Pemberton at a 25, Osoyoos 22, Squamish 26. So we are seeing some daily temperature records fall. Take a look at where we're at right now as far as temperatures go. 13 at YVR, quite a bit cooler as we head out towards the water. But notice even our current temperature gradient showing those yellows towards the valley. We're getting much warmer temperatures, even inland by 5 kilometers, much warmer, hitting the high teens, low 20s for Metro Vancouver. Taking you through a warm overnight. Temperatures will stay up in the high single digits. So we've been noticing that side of this weather pattern as well. Our overnights haven't been getting down to the freezing mark. Those will also be climbing up this week. So a sneak peek at tomorrow's temperatures across Metro Vancouver. Warmer still. I think we'll be breaking more records, and I'll tell you when the peak of the heat comes and when it all ends coming up.
All right. Well, we love this so far. Joe, thanks very much. We'll talk to you again in a little bit. Well, a Surrey singer-songwriter has hit a new low and made her way into the Guinness Book of World Records.
Joy Chapman recorded a C1, which is the lowest C note on a piano, and she entered the record books for lowest female vocal note. Here's a look at how she did it.
La 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 la.
We're seeing the C1, 33.57 hertz.
Oh, there you go. Congratulations.
Yay.
La 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 la.
Incredible stuff. You were a choir boy, weren't you?
A choir boy?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
Oh.
But did you ever hit a C1?
No, I can't hit anything anywhere near that, certainly on key. I mean, I did star in Oklahoma and Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat back in high school, but nobody's keeping track.
A little humble brag there, yeah.
When she said, "Yay," it was like, oh, that's her. Her voice is just like so much high. Anyway, that's amazing. That's congratulations to her into the Book of World Records.
Good for you. Okay, a reminder, if you aren't already doing so, you can also watch our newscasts live on CBC Gem.
CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
Ontario's effort to vaccinate as quickly as possible amidst skyrocketing case numbers hit a roadblock today. We'll tell you why the province is saying it's run out, vaccines next. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Well, many seniors in long-term care have been cut off from the outside world.
But a weekly newsletter is keeping the residents of a Toronto care home entertained. As Jacob Barker explains, it's all about the adventures and observations of a toddler they've never met.
Meet Edison Thiessen.
So Mr. Edison is very adventurous, loves to run and dance and climb and play. He makes jokes and he makes us laugh.
Here at his home in Ruthven with Mom and Dad, his adventures and observations travel by way of a newsletter to Chartwell-Avondale retirement residents in Toronto. The author of Fridays with Edison is actually his mother, but from the perspective of her 2-year-old.
We basically talk about everything from little stuff like our garden and the garlic that is growing up in it, or different things that we see when the seasons change. Like Halloween was a big deal around here, so we would talk about that. Hi, Chrissy.
Thiessen came up with the idea together through daily conversations with her lifelong friend from high school who works at the home, a way to help seniors in the early days of the pandemic after family visits were restricted.
It weighed on my heart seeing how this was impacting them.
Kelton says updates from her friend about Edison would help her feel better.
Anytime I was feeling down, if I thought about Edison or I saw a photo, I'm just like, oh my goodness, he elevates you.
Issues have come out nearly every week since last May and create a lot of excitement at the home.
We would put up a sign saying Fridays with Edison is in. Residents would snatch it up, and the conversation would be, lunch and dinner conversations would be driven by Fridays with Edison.
I have something on my iPad called Notes.
Some have even connected with Edison directly by mail, becoming pen pals.
It will positively impact him in the future when he can learn that he's been part of this story. He can actually have this tangible record of his upbringing.
The hope is, once it's safe, Edison can visit Chartwell Avondale, so residents there can finally meet the boy behind the newsletter. Jacob Barker, CBC News, Ruthven.
What a cutie and a neat idea.
Yes, inspiring for them for certain. Okay, back in just a couple of seconds. Lots more national and international news just ahead, but at 6:25, have a look at Science World, False Creek, downtown Vancouver, Wednesday night. Shortages in vaccines have forced major Toronto health networks to cancel some 10,000 appointments.
Those appointments were for some of the hardest hit communities in the province, like Scarborough.
Lorenda Redekop has more tonight on the vaccine frustration.
This vaccination clinic closed, one of two run by Scarborough Health Network. 10,000 appointments over the next week, canceled at the last minute.
Do I now go and start rushing around and look at 100 different pharmacies to go get a vaccine? Or do I wait? Or, again, you can see where the problem is. Just tell me what I'm supposed to do.
The province blames delays with the Moderna vaccine. Last week's shipment of 300,000 is still not here, and next week's, with 500,000 doses, now only set for the end of the month. This ER doctor wants the Premier to intervene for an area with a 24% test positivity and more hospitalizations and deaths than other regions.
Call up our hospital, find out what the problem is, and give us the vaccine that just arrived within the last 48 hours.
Other hospitals are also running out, with a similar message from North York General, East Toronto for its Thorncliffe Park Community Clinic, and the University Health Network, pausing registrations for people under 50. The head of UHN suggests both the federal government and the province send more vaccine to areas with the most transmission.
People living in different parts of the province would say, I don't pay a differential tax rate. I want the same service as the person in that zone. The difference is that zone is not on fire. This zone at the moment is on fire.
He says UHN is only allocated 4,000 more doses over the next 2 weeks. The province seems unlikely to change its strategy.
I do not believe that the solution is to pull vaccines away from other communities. We just need more supply.
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
The Premier also blamed supply as he reacted to the cancelled appointments in Scarborough.
They were hoping it would come in, so I don't blame them for overbooking 10,000 appointments. I don't blame York for doing that as well. We were expecting the shipments to come in, and unfortunately, we just we never ended up getting them.
For that hospital's clinics, they plan to change how they approach bookings.
Waiting till the vaccine's in hand, we're going to have to really take a hard look at that because it's very distressing for patients.
Not all clinics are running out. Some pharmacies are reporting that they have extra doses. That's for people 55 plus with AstraZeneca. And the City of Toronto says its supply of Pfizer should last until the next scheduled shipment in a week. Lorenda Redicop, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, so here's a possible scenario. What happens if you get a Moderna vaccine and then for your second dose, a Pfizer?
A major study in the UK is looking at mixing and matching shots, and as Tessa Arcilla reports, there may be long-term benefits.
So today you're having the Moderna vaccine?
The UK is expanding a clinical trial today that looks to see whether different COVID-19 vaccines can be mixed and matched. Now, back in February, they launched this trial looking into whether the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines for the first and second doses can be mixed in people. Today, they are including Moderna and Novavax into that list. So they currently have around 800 volunteers. They want to increase that to about 1,000. Now, this trial is important because the different vaccines available on the market trigger the immune response in different ways in the body. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are mRNA vaccines, which tells the body to mimic a part of the virus, and that is what triggers the immune response. The AstraZeneca vaccine is giving the human body a part of a harmless common cold flu that is found in chimpanzees, and that is what triggers that response. And the Novavax vaccine is using a lab-based part of the COVID-19 spike protein. So these are completely different mechanisms that trigger an immune response in humans. So they want to see if this can trigger that response safely. And scientists are also looking into the possibility that mixing and matching can actually give a better immune response in humans. Now, the WHO today, the World Health Organization, pointed out that this could be useful if vaccines encounter production delays or difficulties. It is also important to know that if in the future we need to get booster shots or different COVID-19 vaccines, if it is okay not to get the same shot that we have previously gotten. So there are benefits that scientists are looking into. This is going to be a year-long study, but we are expecting preliminary results in June or July. Tessa Arcilla, CBC News, London.
Bernie Madoff, known for running the largest ever Ponzi scheme, has died. The 82-year-old was in federal prison serving a 150-year sentence. Over decades, he stole billions of dollars from his investor clients, which included charities and pension funds. Madoff was arrested in 2008. He suffered from kidney disease and other medical issues.
5 years into a toxic drug crisis, what has changed and what's the same? We speak to a frontline worker next.
British Columbia's vast mountain ranges, the Bugaboos and the Caribous and the Monashees, are beginning to attract more and more thrill-seeking skiers from all around the world. Kathy Chilko has a report on what may be the riskiest sports business of all.
The business is heli-skiing, and it didn't exist before Hans Moser started it here in the early 60s.
In the beginning, really, I didn't have too many worries. It's only as the operation grew and many more guides, more people, and of course now we're skiing a lot heavier, then all of a sudden something goes wrong here, a little error in judgment there, and all of a sudden you wake up, boy, it is a risky undertaking.
In spite of the risk, each year about 4,000 people come from all over the world to British Columbia, eager to be dropped off the top of a mountain into knee-deep powder. 10 operations compete in this $12 million a year business. Hans Moser's is the biggest and the best in the world, and even he can't give guarantees.
Even though we are very, very serious about what we're doing and we try to do everything we possibly can to make it safe, there are some risks in it, and nobody in his right mind would say, well, come up here, I'll make it 100% safe for you. I certainly can't, and therefore I won't say it either.
The biggest risk to the skier and to the heli-ski business is avalanche. The BC government only licenses operators with knowledge of safety hazards. Still, 2 or 3 people are killed every year in BC. Accidents mean insurance, and like the rest of the world, heli-ski operators have been faced with skyrocketing premiums.
From last year to this year, premiums have gone up roughly 600% for half the coverage, with a big deductible out front.
Moser runs his $8 million a year business out of a tiny office in Banff, Alberta. Customers must sign a waiver and pay higher fees to cover the increased insurance costs. None of this seems to dampen their enthusiasm. Each year, 2,500 heli-ski addicts pay Moser whatever it takes to get them to the powder. These people will end up spending about $5,000 each for 7 days of helicopter skiing. For some, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Others have done it so often they can't remember where they were last week.
We were in the Caraboos last month. Bugaboos last month. I get so confused last month. It was great, the greatest weekly skiing we've ever had.
$5,000 is a lot of money for something that reminds you a little bit of going to camp. 44 skiers, 44 sandwiches. It's all part of the Moser approach. Everything is organized, everything is controlled, so everything can be safe.
Some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News. All teachers in Vancouver Coastal Health will be getting the COVID-19 vaccine, with shots starting this Friday. The mass vaccination plan will start this weekend and then continue on a week-by-week basis. Vancouver Coastal Health will identify and contact staff to let them know when it's their turn to book. So far, Surrey is the only other district where teachers have been vaccinated.
Brutally, honestly, I think that we're going to need more time than this to come back and play hockey.
The candid comments of Vancouver Canuck JT Miller. He says following a COVID outbreak, it may be too soon to return to play. The Canucks are scheduled to play 19 games in 31 days, starting Friday against Edmonton.
And today marks a somber anniversary. It has been 5 years since BC declared a public health emergency because of a spike in overdose deaths. On average, 5 people die every day from toxic drugs in our province. And BC joined a growing chorus today calling on the federal government to decriminalize drugs in an effort to stem the crisis.
Not only has the toxic drug crisis affected people who have lost loved ones, but also the frontline workers themselves who are helping people with treatment and recovery. So tonight we're talking to Keir McDonald, CEO of Surrey's Phoenix Society, which helps people leave the cycle of addiction and homelessness. Thanks for joining us tonight, Keir.
Good evening.
Now, we are 5 years into this public health emergency. Being on the front lines, what changes have you seen in that time period in terms of who's coming in and how they are using?
Look, it's been an incredible 5 years. I mean, when we've seen sort of that from those first, weeks and days back in, 2016, where we really did feel that urgency, the public health emergency being announced in April, but really those services were being ramped up really quickly. We saw things like overdose prevention services, supervised consumption services, the rollout of naloxone. There definitely seemed to be a lot of urgency and activity, but also a lot of us adjusting and reacting to what was this new crisis, what was fentanyl. We were hearing all of these things, but really didn't quite understand it. Over the preceding next 2-3 years, we really continued to do much of what we had done. But, the numbers continued to stabilize. They were rising and then they dropped just pre-COVID. And then, as we all know, things came back in a vengeance last year with a record taking over 1,700 people lost.
Okay, so it's clear the COVID-19 pandemic has really pushed things to the edge.
It has, and we saw again this tremendous spike in losses last year. People were struggling in those early days to access those vital supports, those overdose prevention sites. People were isolating. And so whether you were using substances or you formerly used substances, people's isolation really led to damaging mental health. Over 80% of people are dying alone in their homes. And so COVID really had a dramatic impact on people's ability to do the things that they did to keep them safe.
Well, and I can only imagine seeing all of this unfold, being on the front lines of the crisis now, especially during the pandemic, must be mentally taxing for you. What has it been like these last 5 years and more recently?
It was definitely draining in the early years as well, because just so unpredictably, we just kept losing people. I think what has gone from being a bit draining and burnout and sadness is coming up for anger in people. We are 5 years into this crisis now. I think what's most frustrating these days is there is a lot of talk, even some great announcements, but the delays from the announcements to when we're actually seeing these services implemented or these policies implemented is just taking too long. People are so frustrated and starting to get angry.
So what's the solution here? How do you close that gap between solutions and actually implementing them?
It's a great question. You know, again, I think the government's doing what they can in terms of heading in the right direction on some of the initiatives, but the rollout of some of these services is incredibly slow. You know, what we were able to achieve in the early days of this crisis back in, I said 2016, and the rollout of overdose prevention services, from that first day when Minister Lake, announced the ability to roll out overdose prevention sites, we saw something like 5 services come online in roughly a week. But to even get a single site up and running in a community right now, it seems to take weeks and months and discussions. I just think that it takes, really cooperation across communities, across the health authorities and service providers to really see and treat this like the emergency that it is, and to act now.
Chief Executive Officer of the Phoenix Society, Keir McDonald, thank you for your time tonight, and thank you for all that you're doing.
Thanks for having me.
When the Ever Given blocked the Suez Canal for days on end, these tiny tugs were called in to nudge out the wedged super vessel. The BC connection to the crisis in Egypt just ahead.
Approaching 6:41, a live look at the Cambie Street Bridge in Vancouver. A beautiful evening on the South Coast. More sunshine tomorrow. Could we see high temperature records fall in some parts of the province? We'll find out from Johanna next.
Most people are freaking out.
It's like Olympic for Oregon.
Every competitor dreams about winning.
There's lots of people who could come in and really bring down the house. We just have to wait and see.
Recently, I practiced like mad. From 8 p.m. to morning 7 o'clock. It's super scary.
There's a lot at stake. This is where the most people get knocked out.
Mesdames, Messieurs, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to the Canadian International Organ Competition, or CIOC for short.
They really should have a black guy on the jury, just so we know everything's fair.
I've never done this to myself before, like put myself under this much pressure.
It's more for me. I'm bigger than what I thought.
Could you please go to the jury and tell them what happened? I gotta make Mama proud. Can you just slap me a little bit? Slap me, thank you.
I think I was like in a dream.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. All right, Joe, we are hearing some temperature records could be broken.
Yes, and we're going to see many more of them. Just a few dozen across the province today. Places like Squamish, Lillooet, Osoyoos hitting the low 20s, and it's only going to get hotter. Now, I did find somebody who isn't too impressed with the heat. Hey, Rodney, he's not too sure about the 20-degree temperatures, but he might be one of the few that isn't digging the sunshine and first taste of spring. This is all thanks to big high pressure. Let me show you what this looks like on the satellite and radar. It's locked in place, so it's going to continue to bring in that heat from the interior for the next few days. I can continue to keep it through the weekend and into early next week. Some question about when exactly it breaks down. I'll talk about that in a moment. But here's getting you through Thursday and into Friday. Notice the stream of moisture well off to our northwest. Again, this is thanks to a locked pattern in the jet stream. So a few clouds over Haida Gwaii. That is pretty much it. Look at that forecast across the province tomorrow. Everyone now a good 3 to 5 degrees above seasonal. It'll be more like 5 to 7 degrees above seasonal compared to our 30-year average anyway across most of the BC interior. We've got a 21 tomorrow in through Kelowna, 12 up towards Prince Rupert and Prince George at a 17. I should note, though, for the central interior and the Peace, we're still waking up to temperatures around the freezing mark. Fort St. John a -2 tomorrow morning, but things are warming up quickly. And we will start to talk about our overnight lows, especially on the south coast and the southern interior. They're going to also get up to the double digits as we head into the weekend. Here's that big picture. I just want to show you, keep an eye on the greens and the yellows. That's the heat that we're in right now. Keeps pumping up right through to Tuesday. And then notice that high pressure gets a little pinched off. That's our next chance of showers, although some of the models don't bring a Pacific system in to that hole. And then it does look like high pressure may build right back up again for Wednesday. So keeping an eye on Tuesday, but pretty sure that things will hold until then. Look at the temperatures across the interior. This is where we're going to see more daily temperature records break, getting up to the mid-20s as we head into Friday. We'll see some of those mid-20s here in Metro Vancouver. Look at that, 17s over the next couple of days for the coast, but we'll see inland temperatures creep up with that outflow. Saturday and Sunday, Mike and Anita look like the hottest of the days, and we'll definitely be talking more records, and maybe I can even get an interview by the time we hit the end of the week. We'll see.
Yeah, put in a request for that because we'd like to hear how does he do in mid-20s weather?
We had to buy an air conditioning system last year, and he just lies in front of it.
Oh, good boy, good boy. All right, Joe, thanks very much.
Good boy. You're welcome.
Well, the ship that made international headlines last month for getting stuck in the Suez Canal has now been impounded by Egyptian authorities amid a financial dispute with its owner. The massive Ever Given cargo vessel won't be allowed to leave the country until the $900 million fee is settled. Officials say the amount takes into account the salvage operation, costs of stalled canal traffic, and lost transit fees.
The Japanese-owned ship blocked the canal for nearly a week and was finally freed with the help of tugboats. But did you know those tugboats were designed right here in BC? Our GP Mendoza spoke with the architects who made them about how powerful these vessels can be.
The Ever Given, one of the biggest cargo ships in the world, is sailing free again thanks to the work of some Canadian-designed tugboats. Pushing a vessel of that size was a complex operation that required several diggers, dredgers, and over a dozen tugboats, 6 of which were designed in Vancouver. So how did these Canadian-designed tugboats help free one of the largest container ships in the world? Here's a short recap of what happened. The Ever Given is a cargo ship nearly twice as long as the height of the CN Tower. It got stuck in the narrow waterways of the Suez Canal, a key shipping route which connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea. That caused a backlog of more than 100 other cargo ships, setting off a chain reaction of global supply chain shortages. The pressure was on. It took crews over 6 days to finally dislodge the massive ship. We asked the architects who designed the tugs to explain exactly how these small vessels were able to move something more than 10 times their size.
The ship, when it came along, it hit and ended up in a position kind of like this. So there was contact here, and the bow here was quite well impaled on the side of the bank here. So the stern wasn't wedged on quite as hard as the bow was. They had a couple of tugs here. They had a tow line and a tug sitting here and pulling this way. So this tug is pulling that way, and then over here they had some tugs pushing this way. And I believe that there was a couple here, probably also had a tug here pulling this way, and possibly even, a tug here pushing that way. So it was a multi sort of pronged approach here. There's a lot of calculations that need to be done in this situation. The ship would have been on the side of the canal quite heavily. It hit quite hard. And that would have forced it to rise up and lose buoyancy. So they will have had to have done calculations based on what they can see and how far it stick out of the water to enable them to calculate how much pull they're going to need to get it off.
So how are tugboats able to push and pull vessels so much bigger than them?
These little boats are very, very powerful. For example, the ones that we had designed for this in this operation have about 7,000 horsepower, which is a lot of horsepower for a 100-foot boat. They're locomotive engines. They're something that you would see in a train, for example, or something like a large piece of earth-moving equipment. They are bigger than your car. They are a little bit like bumper cars. They do have very extensive fender system, rubber around the bow of the tug, which enables them to push against the ship without damaging the ship. The tugs have what's called an azimuthing propulsion system. Some people call them Z drives. Essentially what it is the propeller unit that's underwater is able to rotate 360 degrees, and that enables them to thrust in any direction, and it makes them very maneuverable.
How does the tugboat connect to the ship?
Typically, the ship itself would lower down a smaller line, something that they could handle so that the men could handle easily. The tug crew would then attach their tug line, which tends to be quite a bit bigger and stronger because it has to handle the pull of the tug. And then the ship crew would pull that up to the ship and attach it to a cleat or a bollard on the deck of the ship. And then the tug can pull directly from that.
And what type of work do tugboats do in Canada? The tugboats used in Suez are highly specialized machines, but here on the West Coast, they're also a key part of several marine industries.
There's lots of different types of tugs. There's a lot of tugs here in Vancouver Harbor that assist ships into and out of the berths. So there are tugs that escort ships through the first narrows and through the second narrows and out into Juan de Fuca Strait. We call those escort tugs. They're designed to assist any ship that may lose steering or propulsion. They're really an emergency measure. There's tugs that tow barges, tugs that tow log booms. Anything that needs to be pulled or pushed on the water is handled by a tug. It's nice to see our boats get recognition. It's the kind of work that that our tugs, our boats do every day. So we were very proud to see what happened there.
The Ever Given traffic jam put a strain on supply chains and held up an estimated $9 billion in global trade. High speed and foul weather have been blamed as possible causes for how the Ever Given got stuck, but the Suez Canal Authority and ship owners are still investigating exactly what happened. John Paul Mendoza, CBC News, Vancouver.
There's nothing quite like molten glass. My name is Julia Reimer. I'm one of the owners of Firebrand Glass Studio. When you work with molten glass, what's fascinating about it is that it's a liquid that becomes a solid. Glass is a beautiful material when it's cold. You know, it's got color, it's got composition, but it plays with light as well, which makes it really unique as an artistic material, and it's like nothing else. Yeah, I love it. By chance, really, a friend of mine wanted to take a class up at what was then the Alberta College of Art and Design. I took a class and I was instantly hooked. At that time, I was working downtown for Pan Canadian and quit my job and went to art school. Like, it's a really hard skill to learn. It takes years and years and years to train yourself to learn how to shape a liquid. How you blow glass, it starts out pretty much the same way that the Romans did it. So what we do is we take a hollow rod, dip it into a big bowl of molten glass. It's about 1200 degrees Celsius. And then turn that rod using centrifugal force to have it stick onto it. And then you sort of shape it a little bit, blow into that rod, insert air into it, blow it up almost like a balloon. And then through the process of heating it and using different tools, then you shape that glass. You also use centrifugal force and gravity. So if you want to make something quite long, you'll heat up that kind of bubble shape and then stretch it out. Or if you want to make something quite wide, then you'll heat it up and then spin it out. One of the highlights for our career was making the sculpture for Canada's 150th up at the legislature. It's a stunning piece. It's a big metal armature made out of stainless steel that has all these glass inserts in it. And in some of those glass inserts, there's texture of native flowers, teepee rings, animal tracks, river pathways, trade routes, and then also in other ones there's imagery of kind of the province being built. So we really wanted to kind of create with that sculpture a sense of understanding this place and knowing this place and really understanding, like, this is Alberta. Another project that we worked on was we were commissioned by the Royal Tyrrell Museum to make a sculpture on their ceiling that would help people understand to travel through a space, to kind of know where to move to next. And we worked with scientists that focused on the Paleozoic period to look at all the kind of creatures at that time frame. So there was about 75 individual sculptures representing different species that are suspended from the ceiling. People come to the studio and talk to us about, you know, what they'd like, and they're often really like, oh wow, you can do that?
Okay, we are now just 100 days away from the opening ceremony at the Tokyo Olympics.
The Games were put on hold in an unprecedented move because of the pandemic.
But as Devin Haru tells us tonight, they're still on course to happen despite a number of challenges and concerns.
The Olympic motto, faster, higher, stronger. But you get the sense 100 days out from these games, it's about getting to the finish line. Optimism, skepticism on the ground in Japan. Many of the residents there still saying, we don't want these games. But longtime IOC member from Canada, Dick Pound, says there isn't a country or a city more equipped to deal with the games in the pandemic. We know that athletes aren't required to be vaccinated going into these games. They will arrive in the Olympic Village no more than 5 days before their event, compete, and they have to be gone within 48 hours. This is unlike any other games. There's going to be no pomp and circumstance, no parties. It is about completing the games in a safe and healthy way. As for Team Canada, They continue to prepare. They are going. They have a large team, but many of that team still has yet to qualify. Upwards of 75% of those spots still awaiting qualification. Those events happening worldwide, Canadian athletes training in their homes, at-home gyms. They have been creative in the face of all of these challenges. A personal anecdote, one from the Canadian women's softball team. They're in Florida right now. They made the decision they will not see family or loved ones for 4 months. Not until after the games. It is a sacrifice, one all of the Canadian Olympians are willing to make. The clock is ticking.
These games are for sure going to be different. They're going to be different than the previous Olympic Games that I've attended and that others have attended. I think knowing that, having that in our thoughts and in the back of our heads is going to be critical. And you know, there might not be Canadian fans in the stands in Tokyo, but we know there's going to be millions cheering us on.
Chef de mission Marnie McBean says it's not called an Olympic-sized task for nothing. Athletes at their core are problem solvers, she says, and they will solve this problem. They will compete in the Tokyo Games. Devin Haru, CBC News, Toronto.
It's always been a big TV event, perhaps even more so this time around.
For sure, even more so this time around. That's all we can do. All right, you can always watch our newscasts online anytime, cbc.ca/BC.
Dan's here after the National. Have a good night.